On New Year's Eve, I remember my son saying, "Dad, stay home. Key West is no place for pennies." Matthew smirked. Paige nodded, and fireworks whistled in the Portland rain. I washed the dishes and smiled. Okay, let's see what poor looked like. 4 sunsets later, a seaplane would glide across the water in Mallory Square. Captain Reed would call, "Mr. Carter, your plane is ready," and the crowd would watch as my family tasted the price of scorn. I'm sure everyone is curious, right? Before we continue, please comment below and let me know where you heard this story from so I know how far my story resonates. The living room television glowed with a muted countdown while rain stitched silver lines across the Portland windows. In the kitchen, the table wore its best. The old linen runner, mismatched plates, a bowl of winter greens that still smelled faintly of lemon and pepper. A candle guttered in a jelly jar and steadied itself. Steam drifted from the casserole. Somewhere down the block, a firework tried to take the wet sky and failed with a hiss. Matthew loosened his tie like he was shedding the year. Paige set her phone face down with a little tap that sounded like a period. They had brought a small box of store cupcakes, confetti sprinkles shining under the kitchen light. For a few minutes, we did the choreography families do on holidays: pass the bread, ask about sleep, pretend time hasn't been sharpening its knives. "Food's good, Dad," Matthew said, carving into the roast. It was the tone he used in conference rooms, not kitchens. Paige smiled and added salt she didn't need. The television flashed a crowd in Times Square, a river of sequins moving as one. The house answered with its soft old noises, the heater's sigh, the clock's quiet discipline. We had finished seconds and were idling on coffee when the room tensed, the way air tightens before a storm finally commits. Matthew cleared his throat and lifted his cup. "About January," he said lightly. "We should talk plans." Paige followed, voice soft with velvet edges. "Key West is going to be formal, expensive. We don't want you to feel out of place." Matthew didn't wait for the polite blur. He set his cup down. "Dad, stay home. Key West is not for nickels and dimes." The words were clean and efficient. They cut without leaving a mess. The rain seemed to press harder on the glass. I looked at the table because it was easier than looking at my son. The runner had a tea stain from some year Margaret and I couldn't remember, a pale ring like a small moon. The spoon bowl deep in gravy. The Rimo chip on my mug I always turned to 12 o'clock. Ordinary things, standing exactly where they had stood the night before and the year before that. "I see," I said. I reached for plates. Silverware clicked into the stack, a sound I've always liked, bright and certain. Paige began to gather napkins and then thought better of it. "We'll send pictures," she said, and it tried to pass as kindness. On the television, 10 became 9. At the sink, hot water found my hands. The lemon of the soap rose and filled the space where talk had been. Plate, rinse, rack. Plate, rinse, rack. The porch light threw a faint square onto the wet steps. In the frame by the counter, Margaret's smile held steady under glass. I didn't talk to the photo. I didn't need to. She had said everything years ago. "Don't be upset," Matthew called. "It's just better this way." He coughed, a paper-thin sound. "Happy New Year, Dad." "Happy New Year," I answered, and the words stood upright between us, neither falling toward him nor back to me. Coats, door. The careful strike of the deadbolt. The house released its long breath. I turned the volume down until the countdown became only light moving across a wall. The clock kept its patient work. The scent of roast cooled into the room like a story closing its last page. I dried my hands on the dish towel Margaret loved. Its roses faded to a memory of red. There was no need for theatrics. No lecture would change anything. The quiet had asked for something simpler. "All right," I thought, setting the last plate into the rack. "Let's see then what poor looks like." In my office, the lamp threw a gold circle on the desk. Paper waited in neat stacks. Beyond the dark and the rain and someone else's celebration, a southern harbor would clap for a sun folding into the water. Tomorrow would begin with a call they could not imagine. The office lamp made a small island on the desk. Beyond it, the house settled into its nightwork pipes ticking, rain, worrying the eaves. I opened the bottom drawer for a notebook. A business card slid forward and stopped at my wrist. White Stock, my old title. The present loosened its grip. Lamplight thinned into boardroom gloss. A long table reflected faces I knew by the cadence of their keyboards. Sleeves rolled. a closing binder heavy by my elbow. Pens uncapped, their clicks like distant metronomes. Someone joked that our software might finally sleep. "We respect what you built," the buyer said, no theater, just a line of simple truth. We shook hands. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. On the elevator down, the numbers fell 12, 11, 10, while something in me rose that had nothing to do with balance sheets. At home that night, Margaret made tea, not champagne. Steam fogged the rim of her glasses. I tried to describe relief that shines so bright it comes out as laughter. She listened until my words ran thin, then covered my hand with hers. "Money won't turn strangers into saints," she said. "It only turns the lights on. Promise me we won't put up billboards about this. Let time do the measuring. Let people reveal themselves." I promised. Keeping it turned out to be a kind of ballast. I kept the old car, the jacket with the mended cuff. Fixed a faucet because I liked the honest noise a wrench makes. Learned how to say "I'm fine" to questions that were really invitations to inventory. Silence did the rest. The boardroom dissolved. I was back in the lamp's small circle, the card warm in my palm. I slid it away and opened the notebook. A clean page. A pen that started on the first stroke. 2 columns. Keep. Let go. Keep my temper. The dignity of a quiet room. The distance between a lesson and a spectacle. Let go. Explanations, pleading, the hope that people hear better than they see. On the next line I wrote a place, Key West. And then another, Mallory Square. The words fit in the space like coordinates. I could almost hear gulls threading the sky over water I hadn't reached yet. I could see a sun fold itself into the horizon while a crowd applauded for no reason but wonder. "Show, Daniel," Margaret had said once, when our daughter was small and testing how loud a tantrum can be. "Don't tell. Tell and you just teach the tantrum to argue." It was never only about parenting. I closed the notebook. The page looked modest, which felt right. Tides don't announce themselves, they arrive. In the living room, the television had given up its colors and settled on blue. Midnight was already on the far side of the line. I turned it off and let the room return to a house. The clock minding time, the wind tracing the roof, the rain doing what rain always does, stay until it decides to leave. Morning would ask for one call before coffee. Not to Matthew, not to Paige, to someone who understands documents with spines and signatures that hold even when people don't. Morning begins with a call that locks the ground under my feet. Morning came in a pewter wash across the kitchen tile. I let the kettle do its small, important work and opened my phone. Their lives were already curated for me. Matthew's feed was a map they didn't mean to draw. Airport selfies, a sunrise out a window seat, a caption about 4 days of sun. Paige had the rest story bubbles with palm trees, a shared itinerary screenshot that forgot to blur the times, a boomerang of her glass clinking against another in a place tag near Duval Street. Between them I could see the outlines, when they'd arrive, when they'd be out, where the crowds would be thickest at day's end. I wrote the times in my notebook the way you write down tide charts, not to chase them, to place myself where the light would be undeniable. The kettle clicked. I poured. Before the first sip cooled, I called Nora. She answered on the second ring, voice clear as a bell in winter air. "Daniel?" "I need 2 things," I said, quietly. "Go on. Remind me what stands between me and anyone who decides to make decisions for me." Her pause was short, professional. "Your capacity letter from last summer, signed and filed. Your advance directives. Your durable power of attorney names a neutral fiduciary, not family. Guardianship would require a court finding you incompetent, which you are not. And we added a no contest clause to the will, but it can be strengthened." "Do that," I said. "And there's something else." "None?" "If anyone tries to slide papers under my pen while calling it love, I want the law to recognize the trick." "I'll draft an affirmation you can sign this week," she said. "Simple language. You're of sound mind. You don't authorize Matthew or Paige to act on your behalf. You're updating your estate plan of your own free will. We can notarize. It's not dramatic. It's a lock." "Good," I said. "Quiet locks are my favorite kind." She exhaled softly, almost a laugh. "You sound steady." "I am," I said, and in saying it, I heard that it was true. After we hung up, I stood a moment by the window. Portland's rain had thinned to mist, the kind that makes the world look like memory even while you're in it. I finished my coffee and made the second call. The dispatcher spoke in a warm island cadence that tempered the practical with the possible. Yes, they could put a seaplane down in the designated zone just beyond the harbor and taxi to the dock by Mallory Square. No, they didn't shout names unless asked. Yes, sunset is their busiest hour. The crowds come to clap the sun into the sea. I want that hour, I said. And I want my name called. Clearly. A brief silence, then. We can do that. Captain Reed is on rotation for that slot. She runs a tight deck. Perfect. We chose a day close enough to feel like a held breath. I gave them my details, simple as a signature on a postcard. When the dispatcher asked if anyone would be flying with me, the answer arrived as easily as the tide arrives. Number. I booked my own long leg to Florida without fanfare. No upgrades, no announcements. A seat, a window, a book I might not read. The reveal would not be in the air over states I didn't need to see, only on water I very much did. By noon, my inbox began to light. First, Nora's email subject line, affirmation and no-way contest reinforcement. The body was short and clean. I could hear her voice between the sentences. This is a lock. Then the seaplane confirmation. Sunset, Mallory Square. Captain Reed to call the name as requested. A note about the dress code for boarding. None, beyond shoes that won't slide on wet float struts. I smiled and wrote one more thing in the notebook under the day's notes. Keep the shoes with salt in their leather from a beach we used to walk. Let go. The urge to explain to people who already decided what they hear. In the late afternoon, I took the old jacket from its hook and found in the pocket a faded stub from a coastal day trip Margaret and I made when we were still guessing at our future. The paper crackled like a small fire. I put it back. Not as a shrine, just a reminder that water keeps its promises if you meet it where it is. By nightfall, Portland had returned to its soft gray. My bags were not packed. I didn't need to rush the act of leaving. Everything that mattered was already in motion. The road runs south, and the air will smell like salt when the plan meets the light. The air over the Gulf was different the moment I stepped off the plain salt, and sun braided with fuel and limes. Key West flashed its tin roofs and pastel bones, chickens trotting like they owned the crosswalks. I took a cab past porches with guitars and grins, and let myself into a small place near Truman Waterfront Park. A sliver of water lay between rooftops like a promise. I set my bag down and let the room go quiet around it. By late afternoon, I let Duval Street take me. Music leaked out of doorways. A juggler lost an orange and bowed anyway. Sun hats tilted like punctuation. I was 2 blocks from Mallory Square when I saw Matthew's profile thrown onto a shop window, Page smoothing his collar as if a wrinkle could ruin a narrative. He turned. Surprise lifted his face, then smoothed into something public. "Dad," he said, loud enough to carry. "What are the odds?" "Smaller than you'd think," I said. Page stepped in with a practiced brightness. "How are you feeling?" The kind of question meant for witnesses, not answers. "Enjoying the weather," I said. A knot of tourists slowed. A bicyclist belled past, and for a moment we were a tableau. Matthew kept his polite smile where strangers could see it. Then he shifted half a step closer, not lowering his voice. "Listen," he said, "try not to linger around us, okay? We've got reservations and people to meet. Key West can be overwhelming when you're not used to this level." Page nodded, the smile still pinned on. "We don't want you to get lost. Or, misread the vibe. It's not thrifty." A few heads turned. The sun caught in sunglasses, and I saw my reflection in a dozen lenses, older man, flannel collar, hands easy at his sides. Matthew went on, still too loud for what he was saying. "And please don't do the thing where you insist on paying and then it's awkward," he said. "We don't need the nickels and dimes routine in front of our friends." A couple passing by glanced at me, then away. The juggler paused between throws. Paige tilted her head, voice softer but just as public. "It's better if you keep to your own plans. We'll send you a sunset photo." "Clap from wherever you are," Matthew added, gesturing toward the square. "It's a thing here. People clap." I looked at him the way you look at a tide chart, observing, not arguing. "I've heard," I said. He mistook my quiet for confusion. "Also, maybe don't, hover by the nicer places?" He named a price point without saying it. "It sends the wrong message." Paige slid the knife in with velvet. "You're happiest keeping it simple, right? No need to push." A woman near us sucked her teeth. A man in a Hawaiian shirt shot Matthew a look. Someone whispered, "That's his dad?" The street performer cracked a whip, and the sound snapped down the block, a bright line under the words. Matthew didn't notice. "We're just being honest," he said, one hand already half raised as if to wave to an invisible friend. "It's better this way." "Honesty is useful," I said, "even when it arrives loud." Paige blinked, maybe hearing herself for the first time. Matthew didn't. "Anyway, take care," he said, and clapped my shoulder like it might break if he used the weight he saves for other men. "Don't worry about us. We've got it covered." "I never did," I said. They moved on, resumes in motion, folding themselves back into the crowd. I watched until the tide of people erased their outlines, then drifted the other way, toward the quieter mouth of the island where rope and tar smell like work and not performance. At the edge of the waterfront, the sea breathed the way it always has. I sat on a low wall and let the light wash the noise out of my head. Gulls argued over nothing. A child laughed in a language that didn't need translating. Duval's roar dulled to a hum behind me. The square would clap the sun down soon. Tomorrow I'd stand where masts make a forest Key West historic seaport, where water carries voices farther than they mean to go. Some conversations prefer witnesses who don't blink. Beneath rigging and gulls at historic seaport, I'll hear exactly what I came for. I chose a bench with a view of the water and the aural privacy of a crowd. People move in eddies here, dockhands with shoulders like pilings, tourists with paper cups, a couple arguing gently about tides. Voices carry, but no one is listening for long. I saw them come along the boardwalk, Matthew walking important, phone in hand, Paige tucked just off his shoulder like a second thought. They stopped near a piling, close enough to the water to watch a charter back into its slip, close enough that their words crossed the space between us without effort. "I'm telling you, it's getting worse," Matthew said. He looked right at me and didn't get the hint. He's confused about money, about boundaries. Paige didn't take her eyes off the boat. "We can't keep managing his feelings. This is about safety and optics. We can't have him dragging around our plans." "Guardianship," Matthew said, trying the word out, "or at least power of attorney. If we get him to sign while he's in this state, we can handle everything without this awkwardness." "Sell the house," Paige added, soft and practical. "Use the proceeds. Independent living first, then memory care when he declines. We'll say the doctor recommended it." "And the car," Matthew said. "He shouldn't be driving, he could hurt someone. We'll frame it as responsible." They were matter of fact, like they were talking about storm shutters instead of a person. A gull wheeled and scolded, then fell quiet. The charter's engines coughed once and stilled. Paige finally looked up at him. "We'll need a paper trail. Start with the narrative concerned family. Get Michael to corroborate what we've observed." Matthew nodded, thumbs moving over his phone. "I'll draft an email tonight. Keep it gentle. People love gentle." They moved on, their reflections walking the water beside them until a bow wake tore the image and mended it again. I sat where I was and let the halyards finish their speech. The lesson I'd planned, simple, public, clean, shifted weight inside me. This wasn't only about embarrassment in a square. They were reaching for the keys to my life. I stood and walked toward the end of the pier where the noise thins and the horizon opens. The phone felt heavier than it is. Nora answered on the first ring. "Tell me," she said. I told her in the least number of words that still carried shape. Guardianship, power of attorney, sell the house, the tone of their voices like they were assembling furniture. Her reply came trimmed of everything but function. "Your capacity letter stands. We'll notarize a fresh affirmation today. I'll add a physician's note if needed. I'll file a letter of intent stating your housing preferences and your refusal to delegate to family. I'll also tighten the no contest clause. You can leave a nominal bequest and bar challenges. Keep communication in writing. Do not sign anything they hand you." "I won't," I said. "And Daniel?" "Yes. Do what you came to do. Don't argue it, show it." I hung up and watched a small boat nose out of the marina, its wake scalloping the afternoon. A child threw a pebble. Rings ran out to the pilings and came back changed. On the way back toward town, I wrote 2 new lines in the notebook, standing in the shade of a mast. "Keep the ground under my feet. Let go their access to any door that leads into my life." Tomorrow, the sun would drop behind the blue line and a crowd would put their hands together for it. I would be standing where the clapping is loudest. The harbor would hold the mirror. Sunset at Mallory Square, Captain Reed, the crowd, and a name called over water. By late afternoon, the island tilted toward gold. Mallory Square set its small theater chalk rings on brick, ropes coiled by the seawall, a guitar finding tune. Frying oil drifted sweet. The crowd rose like tide. My phone buzzed. From Matthew. If you're around the square tonight, please don't come over. We've got friends. Don't make it weird. A beat later, Paige. Heat can be a lot for you. Find shade. We'll send a video of the clap. I let both messages pass. In their corner, Matthew performed a story, hands cutting shapes. Paige laughed on cue. Two new friends nodded like metronomes. I stepped under a palm's ragged shade and dialed the number on my confirmation. Seaplane operations. A clear voice. Daniel Carter. Confirming sunset. On schedule, Mr. Carter. Captain Reed will make the name call at the dock. Seas friendly. We'll taxi in from the west light behind you. You'll be heard before you're seen, I said, a smile in the voice. Yes, sir. I walked the edge of the water. The sea laid its blue sheet down and lifted it again. Cats jumped through hoops for a man in a hat and applause they pretended not to need. A tightrope trembled, then steadied. Children pointed at the horizon, as if the sun required direction. Nora's text arrived, filed and notarized. Capacity reaffirmed. No, contest tightened. You're buttoned up. I answered, thank you. She replied with a single checkmark. Locks don't need speeches. The square thickened. Light climbed down facades and settled on brick. Someone dropped a fork. Someone else fell briefly in love. I stood just outside Matthew's orbit, where I could read his mouth without catching his voice. He glanced over, measuring. Paige followed his look and retied the ribbon on her smile. I nodded nothing more and let the promise in my pocket warm like a flat stone. An early clap popped from habit. Laughter chased it. Then the hush, the kind that knows it will be broken well. The horizon drew a hard line. Faint at first, a hum threaded the air. Not wind. Not a generator. A different animal. Heads tilted. Hands shaded brows. The hum thickened, picked up a blade's rhythm. People pointed west, where the sky still held too much light to stare straight on. The tightrope walker stepped back and swept an arm at the water, giving it the stage. A glint moved low and level, catching fire where the last sun struck. The sound deepened, steady as a heartbeat that belongs to something bigger than you. A boy near me squealed, "Plane!" The word unzipped attention in one clean line. Even Matthew's circle turned as one body. The floats kissed the chop and threw a clean feather of spray. Propwash pushed warm air across the bricks. Applause rose for the sunset, and, for a beat, it sounded like the clapping belonged to the plane. A woman in a headset stepped onto the dock, balanced as if the water knew her name. Navy polo clipboard tucked firm. She cupped a hand and let her voice ride the harbor. "Mr. Daniel Carter, your plane is ready." Heads turned. A path opened, neat as a zipper. I walked it. "Dad!" Matthew's voice brightened like a switch had been thrown. "There you are." He laughed for the audience already filming. "You didn't tell us you were doing this." Paige slid beside him, eyes glossy with instant pride. "This is incredible," she said, pitching to the bystanders. "We were just saying we should all do something special together." Captain Reed's name, stitched small over her pocket, caught my eye and nodded. "Boarding when you're ready, Mr. Carter." Matthew stepped in, still smiling for strangers. "Quick thought," he said, purposefully loud. "Any chance there's room for us to hop on? Be a blast to fly in with you. We can cover our part." He chuckled like money was a private joke. Paige's fingers touched my sleeve, light as a sales tag. "We're very easy," she said. "Go with the flow." "Step back from the edge, please," Captain Reed called evenly to everyone. "Prop is live." They didn't step back. "Dad, don't make it weird," Matthew murmured not quietly enough. "We're family. It'll look bad if you refuse. Right, Captain?" "Today's manifest is one passenger," Captain Reed said. Calm. Final. Paige cranked the wattage. "You look great," she sang. "We're so proud. Let's make a memory. 4 nights ago in my kitchen. Proud had been poor." Those words lived in the same drawer now. I chose the one that fit. I looked at my son. 4 days ago you told me to stay home," I said, level. "You said Key West wasn't for nickels and dimes." He opened his mouth to revise the scene. I didn't leave him lumber. This is my answer. Paige's smile slipped, tried to find ground. "We were worried," she said quickly. "The heat, your health." Enough, I said, not loud, just finished. I don't take passengers who mistake kindness for weakness. Not on land, not on water. Please, Matthew said, dropping the stage voice a half step. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being exact. He extended a hand as if the gesture itself could close the gap. So, can we? I glanced at Captain Reed. She lifted the clipboard a fraction, ready but not rushed. I faced the two of them and the friends who would later tell this wrong. No sermon, no fury, just the measure of the thing. I'm afraid, I said, you're too poor to afford this flight. A breath went through the nearby faces. Not shock at the plane recognition. Matthew flushed. Then he tried on a smile that didn't know where to land. Fine, he said, and the word had no chair to sit in. Please step back, Captain Reed repeated, exact as tide. She touched my elbow, guiding me onto the float with quick, practiced certainty. The dock wobbled once under my shoes, then the plane claimed my weight. Inside smelled like sun-warmed vinyl and clean metal. At the doorway I turned. This is where you stop, I said. From here on you don't speak for me, over me, or about me as if I can't hear. Not anymore. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. The door sealed. The harbor flattened into a painting behind the window. Departure checklist, Captain Reed said over the intercom, voice steady. The engine's note climbed. The floats loosened and drew a bright seam across the water. Mallory Square slid. Hands lifted without knowing why. We gathered speed. The seawall shrugged. The bricks let go. We rose. Key West folded like a map closing. Below, Matthew was a period at the end of a sentence. Page a brightness with nowhere to land. Somewhere in the prop's clean noise, the word poor lost its teeth. I leaned back and let the belt find its place. Tomorrow would be Portland gray light on wood grain, Nora's papers spread like small anchors, signatures that hold when people don't. Back in Portland, at my kitchen table, rain ticked the eaves and coffee warmed the room. Nora Kim set a neat fan of papers under the lamp. We'll keep it simple, she said. Affirmation notarized. Capacity current. Durable power stays with the fiduciary, not family. No contest strengthened. Foundation documents ready. The bell rang. Matthew stepped in, already shaping a speech. Page followed, polished and pale. They left umbrellas dripping by the door. That stunt in Key West, he began, then saw Nora. We should talk privately. This is private enough, I said. Page tried warmth. You blindsided us, Daniel. If you'd told us, we could have revised the story, I said. You were rehearsing one on Duval Street. Color moved in Matthew's face. We were concerned. About your judgment. The heat. At the seaport, I said. You discussed guardianship and selling my house. You sounded like you were assembling furniture. Nora turned to Page. Mr. Carter's affirmation states he acts of his own will, declines to delegate to family, and prefers to remain in his residence unless he chooses otherwise. Signed and notarized. Page gave a brittle laugh. We said guidance, not... You said guardianship, I said. And sell the house. You also said, people love gentle. I heard you both. Silence closed. Rain stitched it. Nora rotated the will toward me. This finalizes the NOAA contest language and specific bequests. I signed where the tabs asked. Nora witnessed. Steady hand. Neat name. Matthew leaned in, palms open. Dad, please, we love you. You love the version of me that apologizes for existing, I said. That version retired. Page reached for a bridge. Families fight. Then they forgive. There will be no forgiveness, I said. Not cruel. Exact. Nora slid a folder forward, embossed simply, The Margaret and Daniel Carter Foundation. Scholarships and community grants in Portland and the Florida Keys, she said. Fully funded. Matthew stared. You're giving it away. I'm putting it to work, I said. All of it. And us? Each of you receives $1, Nora said evenly. Any challenge forfeits even that. The court will see Mr. Carter's capacity and today's affirmation. Page tasted the number. $1. Return my house key, I said. Matthew hesitated, then freed the metal from his ring. It clicked against wood. Page followed, motion stiff. Two small shapes lay side by side, ordinary as a truth you don't want. From here on, I said, you don't speak for me, over me, or about me as if I can't hear. You don't manage my mail, my doctor, my car, or my calendar. If you need to say something, write it. Most things don't need saying. Matthew looked past me, hunting a door the room didn't offer. You're choosing this. I am, I said. Nora gathered the documents, squared them with a practice tap, and closed her case. We're done. I walked them to the threshold. The rain had softened to a fine screen. I opened the door. They searched my face for the father who used to fold. He wasn't home. Goodbye, I said.